Hey everyone, there's a new update with React. And up until now, we learned how to do code splitting with React. And let's be honest here, it was kind of hard. It was kind of cumbersome. Well, with the newest version of React, we now have something called React Lazy. And React Lazy, well, it allows us to do code splitting very, very easily. So in the previous exercise, I asked you to try and implement this yourself. If you're able to get it, good job. Otherwise, let's see how we can incorporate React Lazy to do code splitting. Let's get started. So we have our repository that I gave to you. And all we have to do here is just simply clone this repository in our terminal. So let's say git clone. And we'll move into this repository. Now, the very first step we're going to do is say npm install. And oh boy, that's not good. We've seen this before, right? In the React section when we talked about updating packages. If we don't maintain our packages and keep them up to date, well, usually without updating our packages, we'll probably have some vulnerabilities. In this case, oh boy, there's 2 critical vulnerabilities, 655 high ones. That's not good. So let's fix that. And we've already done this before. So all we have to do is say npm audit fix. So we'll fix them up. That feels good. We fixed a bunch of things, but you see here that we didn't fix all of them. Some of them, 27, require manual review. Again, something that we've already talked about in the React section where we talked about updating packages. Although I recommend actually going through the packages and making sure that we want to update them, because this is a simple project, we won't have any breaking changes. We can just run npm audit fix -- force to make sure we fix all the remaining vulnerabilities. Also, I don't know if you can hear this, but there's a massive rainstorm happening outside. So if you hear water trickling down, I promise you I'm not in the bathroom recording this. All right, things are looking good. It looks like we had one package that involved breaking changes, and there's 3 vulnerabilities requiring manual review and could not be updated. But we'll get back to those in a second, because now we should be able to do npm start and see our project run. But before we do that, let's open up the code into our favorite code editor. That's great. And then let's do npm start. Everything should be working. There we go. Our nice, beautiful page. Now, if you clone the repo like I just did, and we open up the console here, or the network tab, let's make sure we clear everything. When I click on page 2, well, nothing happens because we're not doing any code splitting right now. The way this file is set up, if we go into app.js, is that it has the 3 things that we've done. The no code splitting part 1, which is what we're doing right now. We have the part 2 code splitting, which we've talked about before, right here. And then we have part 3, which was the code splitting using the async component. So if we comment these out and do part 3 async component, scroll all the way to the bottom here, comment out the render with the no code splitting, and comment the part 3 with the async component. If we save this, go back and refresh, let's clear this. If I click on page 2, there we go. Our chunk 2 and chunk 3 are loading because now we're doing code splitting. But we have a better way, right? We have a React Lazy that allows us to do code splitting. So let's see how that would look like. First, we see that now we can use something called react.lazy when we import the components. So let's do that. Up at the top, we'll comment the async component out and do part 4. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And part 4, we'll use react.lazy. Now, react.lazy can be used like this. We can say const, let's call it page2lazy, is going to equal react.lazy. And then from here, if we look at the documentation, we simply have a function inside here. So if we copy this, we have a function that dynamically imports a component. In our case, we want to import the page2 component. So let's add this here and then do the same thing for page 3. So again, we'll say page3 lazy and we'll import page 3. There we go. So now we have this lazy component, which tells us, hey, only load up this component, be lazy, and only load it up when we use it in the render function. So now if we scroll all the way down, instead of part 3 here where we use the async component, we're going to do part 4 using react.lazy. And we're going to copy this and show you the difference. So if I copy and paste, there we go. We don't need the old async component way of doing things. Now in here, we no longer need to use this async component. So let's just remove this line because we're importing up at the top here. We also don't need this line either. There we go. And now instead of async page2, we use the page2 lazy component. And then same here, page3 lazy component, just like that. Now, the last thing we need to add is if we look at the documentation, what React Lazy does is it's a function that lets us render a dynamic import, right? But that means if we're rendering something dynamically, that is, when React sees in the render function that, oh, we need page2, it's going to import it. But while it's importing it, the user is going to be staring at a page thinking, what's happening? Where is the component on the page? So the lazy component should be rendered inside what we call a suspense component, which allows us to show some fallback content, such as a loading indicator, while we wait for this component to load. Because again, it's going to look at this component and it's going to say, oh, we need this component. Let me go import it. And while that importing is happening, even though it's super, super fast, we want to have a fallback. So the way we do this is that we always wrap these lazy components in a suspense component. And again, this is a new feature of React. So all we have to do is wrap this in a suspense component. And this suspense component, if we look over here, has to have a fallback attribute. And this fallback attribute or property needs to have or return a React component. So in this case, we can do div loading, but we can render anything we want. So this is the fallback. It says, hey, while page2 is loading, or if something happens and we can load page2, well, in that case, the fallback should be this component. And this suspense is a new feature. That means we can import this component because it comes with React. So in here, I can just say suspense, just like that. So now that we've imported suspense, we can include it in here and wrap all our lazy components. So once again, we do the same thing here too. We say return. Let's copy this. We'll have a loading component again with a suspense fallback, just like that. And then we close suspense. Now, if I save this, let's make sure we finish off the brackets. So we're returning a component, a lazy component wrapped in suspense. So if I save this, looks like I don't get any errors. That's good. But what happens when I try to run this? let's go back to our app and refresh, and Webpack default lazy is not a function. So React.lazy is not working. Can you think why that is? Well, remember what I said. React lazy and the suspense component is actually a new feature of React. And if you look at our package.json, when I originally recorded the videos, the latest was 16.2 React. But if we look at the React version, well, that's definitely higher now, isn't it? So what we need to do is update this React package so that we can use the latest feature, that is React Lazy and Suspense. Now, there's a nifty little way for us to do that. And that is, when we close the server, we can just do npm update, which will update the packages because we have these carets. It's going to say, hey, update the package to any minor version update that you have. So if I do npm update, there you go. We've updated our packages, and when I click on package.json, notice how the version number changes. Hey, that's nice. That's better. So now we have the latest version of React. So if I do npm start now, we should have React Lazy and Suspense component available to us. And one thing I realize here is that suspense is spelled with an S here. So make sure you're careful here. It should be suspense, not with a C. So make sure that we have suspense spelled properly. So we have suspense, 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 suspense. Because the compiler actually won't give you an error. Instead, you'll get some funky errors and you're going to be wondering what's going on. So that's actually a common mistake, especially for non-native speakers. So let's save. We get no errors. Package.json, everything's updated. So if we go back to our app, okay, we have page 1. Let's open up Developer Tools. No errors. If we go to the Network tab, let's make this a little bit bigger. Let's clear everything. If I go on page 2, hey, look at that. I got my first chunk, then page 3, the second chunk, and no errors were found. Just like that, we've used React.lazy to lazy load components only when we need them. And this is, I would say, quite an improvement, right, from what we had before. Again, one of the beauties of having React constantly updated is that when common problems occur, we try to find the easiest solutions and hopefully add these new features to the library so that we make our apps more performant and also simpler to build. And now we have an updated app with all the vulnerabilities gone and code splitting in effect. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.